Good afternoon and welcome. Today, we delve into a profoundly complex and often contentious issue: the use of human embryonic stem cells, or HESCs, in scientific research. This topic sits at the intersection of remarkable scientific potential and deeply held ethical convictions. On one hand, the promise of cures for debilitating diseases. On the other, fundamental questions about the moral status of the human embryo. Joining us to navigate this intricate landscape are two distinguished experts. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a biomedical researcher at the forefront of stem cell science, will argue in favor of HESC research. And Professor Alicia Khan, a respected bioethicist, will present the arguments against its use. Our debate will proceed with opening statements from each participant, followed by rebuttals, a moderated discussion, and finally, closing remarks. Dr. Tanaka, would you please begin with your opening statement?
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Human embryonic stem cells possess a truly unique and powerful characteristic known as pluripotency. This means they have the extraordinary ability to differentiate into virtually any cell type in the human body: neurons, heart muscle cells, insulin-producing pancreatic cells, and many more. This inherent flexibility offers unparalleled potential, not just for understanding the fundamental processes of human development and disease, but crucially, for developing revolutionary therapies. Imagine a future where we can effectively treat, or even cure, devastating conditions like Parkinson's disease by replacing damaged neurons, or type 1 diabetes by generating functional pancreatic beta cells, or spinal cord injuries by regenerating nerve tissue. This isn't science fiction. It's a tangible prospect that HESC research brings within our reach. The primary source for these invaluable cells are surplus embryos created through in vitro fertilization, IVF. These are embryos that are not needed for reproductive purposes and, under current standard practice, would ultimately be cryopreserved indefinitely or discarded. It is crucial to understand that we are talking about blastocysts, very early stage embryos, typically 5 to 6 days post-fertilization, consisting of about 100 to 200 cells. At this stage, they lack any semblance of sentience, consciousness, or a developed nervous system, the attributes commonly associated with personhood. They possess biological potential, yes, but they are not viable individuals outside the specific environment of a uterus. Therefore, under stringent ethical guidelines and robust regulatory oversight, utilizing these surplus IVF embryos for research represents a morally justifiable path. It allows us to harness their unique potential to alleviate immense human suffering, transforming biological material that would otherwise be destroyed into a source of hope and healing.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. Professor Khan, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. While the aspiration to cure disease and alleviate suffering is undoubtedly noble, and one I deeply share, we must critically examine the means employed to achieve these ends. The pursuit of scientific advancement, however promising, cannot ethically justify the deliberate destruction of nascent human life. My central argument rests on the conviction that a human embryo, from the moment of conception, possesses inherent moral status. It carries a unique and complete human genetic code, directing its own development towards becoming a fully formed human being. This isn't merely biological potential in an abstract sense. It is an organism already embarked on the trajectory of human life. To intentionally halt that development and harvest its cells, regardless of the stage, blastocyst or otherwise, constitutes the instrumentalization of one human life for the potential benefit of others. The origin of these embryos as surplus from IVF procedures does not diminish their moral significance. An embryo's value is intrinsic and does not depend on whether it is wanted or destined for implantation. Furthermore, the argument that HESC research is indispensable is increasingly challenged by remarkable progress in alternative fields. Research involving adult stem cells, which are ethically uncontroversial, has yielded significant therapeutic benefits. Moreover, the development of induced pluripotent stem cells, iPSCs, where adult somatic cells are reprogrammed to an embryonic-like state, offers a powerful alternative that bypasses the ethical quandaries associated with HESCs entirely. Given these viable and ethically sound alternatives, the continued insistence on pursuing HESC research appears less necessary and more ethically problematic. Finally, we must consider the perilous slippery slope. Sanctioning the destruction of embryos for research risks, eroding our societal respect for human dignity at its earliest stages, potentially paving the way for the commodification of human life and other ethically questionable practices. Noble goals must be pursued through ethically sound means.
Thank you, Professor Khan. We now move to the rebuttal phase. Dr. Tanaka, you have the opportunity to respond to Professor Khan's points.
Professor Khan raises important ethical considerations, but I must contest the assertion that a blastocyst, a cluster of 150 undifferentiated cells, possesses the full moral status equivalent to that of a developed human being. There is a significant biological and philosophical distinction between a potential life and an actual person exhibiting consciousness, sentience, and integrated bodily function. The potentiality argument is complex. This potential is entirely dependent on implantation within a womb, a condition unavailable to surplus IVF embryos destined for discard. To equate this conditional potential with actual personhood seems a fraught proposition. Regarding alternatives like iPSCs, while incredibly promising and a vital area of research, they are not yet a perfect substitute for HESCs. We are still understanding the nuances of iPSCs, including potential epigenetic memory from their original cell type and concerns about their propensity to form tumors, teratomas. Furthermore, adult stem cells, while valuable, are generally multipotent, not pluripotent, meaning their differentiation potential is more limited compared to HESCs. Human embryonic stem cells remain the gold standard for understanding early human development and certain disease mechanisms, providing insights that alternatives currently cannot replicate fully. Dismissing HESC research prematurely closes off potentially unique avenues for therapies and fundamental knowledge. The ethical imperative must balance the status of the blastocyst against the potential to save countless lives and alleviate profound suffering, all conducted under rigorous ethical oversight, designed precisely to prevent the abuses Professor Khan rightly warns against.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. Professor Khan, your rebuttal.
Dr. Tanaka attempts to establish a morally significant threshold based on developmental stage, or the presence of certain characteristics like sentience. However, I contend that human life is a biological and moral continuum, beginning at conception. Drawing lines based on developmental milestones is inherently arbitrary and risks devaluing human life at its most vulnerable stage. Whether a blastocyst possesses sentience is irrelevant to its status as a living human organism with inherent dignity. The dependency on implantation does not negate its intrinsic nature. Many born humans are dependent on external support for survival, yet we do not question their moral status. While acknowledging the ongoing research into iPSCs and adult stem cells, Dr. Tanaka perhaps understates their progress and potential. Therapeutic successes using these ethically sourced cells are mounting, demonstrating their viability. The technical challenges associated with iPSCs, such as tumorigenicity, are being actively addressed, and these challenges do not justify resorting to the ethically fraught use of embryos. The core ethical principle remains: the intentional destruction of an entity recognized biologically as the start of a human life, solely for the benefit of others, is unacceptable. The fact that these embryos might otherwise be discarded does not confer permission to actively destroy them for research purposes. Discarding and instrumentalizing for destruction are morally distinct actions. A utilitarian calculus that weighs potential future benefits against the present destruction of life is a dangerous path. We must uphold deontological principles that affirm the inviolability of human life from its inception. Reliance on regulations, while necessary, may not be sufficient to prevent the erosion of ethical standards or the potential for future abuses once the fundamental line of destroying embryonic life is crossed.
Thank you both. Let's move into a more direct discussion. I have a few questions to probe deeper into your core disagreements. Professor Khan, many individuals and regulatory bodies find the discarding of surplus IVF embryos ethically acceptable, or at least permissible. Could you elaborate on why using these same embryos for potentially life-saving research, rather than simply discarding them, crosses an ethical line for you?
Dr. Reed, the distinction lies in the intention and the action. While the fate of discarded embryos is tragic, the act of discarding is often framed as allowing nature to take its course, or ceasing extraordinary measures to preserve them outside the context of reproduction. Using them for research, however, involves a direct, intentional act of destruction for a specific purpose, harvesting their cells. It transforms the embryo from a potential life, however contested its status, into a mere resource, an object to be exploited. This instrumentalization is the crucial ethical boundary that is crossed.
Dr. Tanaka, Professor Khan raised concerns about the slippery slope and the adequacy of regulations. How can the scientific community provide concrete assurances to the public that robust ethical boundaries are not only established, but will be rigorously enforced to prevent the potential commodification or misuse Professor Khan fears?
That is a vital concern, Dr. Reed. Assurances come through multiple layers: strict national and international regulations, institutional review boards, IRBs, specialized ethics committees overseeing stem cell research, like SCRO committees, and transparency in research protocols and funding. These frameworks explicitly prohibit practices like human reproductive cloning or the creation of embryos solely for research purposes. Furthermore, the scientific community engages in ongoing dialogue about ethics, constantly refining guidelines based on scientific advancements and societal values. Public engagement and education are also key to building trust and ensuring accountability. It is not foolproof, but the system is designed to be rigorous and adaptive to prevent ethical breaches.
A final question for both of you, perhaps the most challenging one. Can you define the precise point at which you believe an embryo or fetus acquires protectable moral status, making its destruction impermissible? And what is the primary justification for drawing the line at that specific point? Professor Khan, perhaps you first?
From my perspective, grounded in the biological reality of human life beginning at fertilization, protectable moral status is present from conception. The justification is that fertilization marks the creation of a new, genetically distinct human organism with the inherent potential and internal drive to develop into a mature human being. There is no subsequent biological event that represents a more compelling or less arbitrary point to confer fundamental moral worth. Any later point, implantation, gastrulation, sentience, introduces problematic ambiguities.
Dr. Tanaka?
I respectfully disagree with locating full moral status at conception. While the blastocyst is biologically human life, I believe protectable moral status, particularly the kind that would prohibit potentially life-saving research, develops gradually. Significant markers might include the development of the primitive streak, around 14 days, precluding twinning and marking individuation, or later, the capacity for sentience or consciousness associated with neural development. Prior to such stages, particularly with IVF blastocysts lacking the potential for uterine development, the moral weight is insufficient to override the immense potential benefit of research aimed at alleviating suffering in existing persons. My justification rests on a distinction between biological life and biographical life, or personhood, which involves certain capacities.
Thank you both for tackling that difficult question. We now turn to closing statements. Dr. Tanaka, please summarize your position.
Throughout this discussion, I have emphasized the unique and exceptional potential inherent in human embryonic stem cells. Their pluripotency offers an unparalleled window into human development and a powerful tool for combating a wide spectrum of devastating diseases, conditions that currently inflict profound suffering on millions worldwide. We are not embarking on this research lightly, nor are we operating in an ethical vacuum. Decades of ethical deliberation have led to robust regulatory frameworks designed to ensure responsible conduct, focusing research on surplus IVF embryos that hold no prospect of developing into a child and would otherwise be destroyed. While alternatives like iPSCs are valuable and complementary, HESCs currently retain unique advantages for certain research questions and potentially for specific therapeutic applications. To abandon this line of inquiry, based on attributing full personhood to a microscopic collection of undifferentiated cells, seems a disproportionate response when weighed against the tangible hope for cures and treatments. This is fundamentally about a commitment to advancing medical science for the betterment of humanity. It involves making a difficult but ethically considered choice to utilize resources that cannot become individuals, transforming them into a potential source of profound healing and relief from suffering. We must look forward, guided by scientific evidence, rigorous ethical oversight, and a compassionate drive to improve human health and well-being.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. Professor Khan, your closing statement.
Thank you. The potential benefits highlighted by Dr. Tanaka are indeed compelling, yet they cannot obscure the fundamental ethical principle at stake: the sanctity and inviolability of human life from its very beginning. My opposition to human embryonic stem cell research stems from the unavoidable fact that it requires the intentional destruction of a human embryo, a living organism possessing a unique human identity and the inherent potential for full human development. To treat these nascent lives as mere biological resources, as a means to an end, however noble that end may seem, is ethically unacceptable. It violates the fundamental principle that human beings should never be instrumentalized. Furthermore, the argument of necessity is significantly weakened by the remarkable advancements in ethically non-contentious alternatives. Induced pluripotent stem cells and adult stem cells offer burgeoning possibilities for regenerative medicine without requiring the destruction of embryonic life. It is imperative that we channel our resources, ingenuity, and ethical commitment towards maximizing the potential of these alternatives. Allowing HESC research risks desensitizing society to the value of human life at its earliest stages and opens the door to the commodification of human reproduction. Regulations, while well-intentioned, may not ultimately prevent the erosion of ethical standards or the potential for future abuses once this fundamental line is crossed. We must adhere steadfastly to ethical principles that protect all human life, urging a decisive rejection of research that necessitates embryonic destruction in favor of approaches that honor both scientific progress and human dignity.
Thank you, Professor Khan, and thank you, Dr. Tanaka, for your insightful and passionately argued perspectives on this vital matter. It is clear that the dialogue surrounding human embryonic stem cell research remains essential as we continue to grapple with balancing the frontiers of scientific capability and our core ethical values. Thank you for joining us.